Brian, can you feel the freedom?
Oh my God!
I mean, do you
I just want to say something.
Say shit.
I'm still gun shy about it. Fuck. Oh, that feels nice.
Folks,
feels good. Try not to curse for just 5 months.
I know it was difficult. We only really had a few mistakes in which we had to go back and edit out.
I think last week was my first one on radio where I said shit by accident, and it was totally reactionary too. Like I was laughing.
Yep. It wasn't like you were.
Morgan laugh on some shit.
It wasn't an angry shit. It wasn't an angry shit.
No. There's no reason that the FCC should care about that. Is it FCC? ECC?
FCC. Not the ACC or the SEC or the Pac-12. No, it's the FCC.
FCC.
Watch. Hey, buddy.
If you call someone a shithead,
go ahead.
But if you're like, oh, that's so funny. Oh, shit. What's the big deal?
Okay.
I'm really I'm reveling in it. Sorry.
No, I'm glad that you're enjoying it.
If I'm not careful, it's just going to turn into that episode of South Park. Do you remember that from like the second or third season where they say fuck like 65 times?
Tell me more.
There's like a counter. It's a joke about not being able to cuss on TV. There's like a counter in the bottom how many times they say the F word.
I do remember that.
Old South Park. Like,
is South Park not good anymore?
I only watched the first couple, maybe the first 4, then I was out. Like The Simpsons, it was good, but I can't do 60 seasons or whatever. My attention span.
Hey, we need to remember a few things today, which is at some point we'll have to take breaks in order to squeeze in some wonderful sponsorships for this podcast. Dude, we kind of had a fun week with our listeners, right? Those P1s who have listened since day one. So we let them record some ad spots. So Jay Schrader, you're going to hear him. Larry Collette did our intro. Dr. Larry Collette. Brock Harper did, I believe, the Fermentra one. Who else am I missing? We brought Mike J back into the fold to do the intro. He got excited about it. He doesn't have necessarily that voice of whoever the hell the guy was from Mile High Sports that was just way too intense. But sports nerds, hey! But alas, so
it breaks up sort of the monotony of our voices.
It breaks up the monotony in our voices. I think we can drop the GD back into the.
Oh yes.
Yeah. We can do all these kind of fun things.
So my kid says that Jill plays the podcast for Sawyer in the car because he likes to hear my voice on it.
Okay.
And he loves the by a bunch of goddamn nerds. The John my 4-year-old says that.
And that's what he says.
Yeah, I've never heard him. That she tells me that he's a huge fan. Huge fan of that part.
Huge fan. Not of the show, just of that.
No, I don't think he cares what we're saying.
All right. Well, I think we've blabbered on long enough. We promised people we won't do this. In moving on into the future, there were. Let's just get to it.
Were there comments about too much whatever this is?
No, I think sometimes I think we went on a lot about about shit that maybe people just don't care about. But that was different because we had a 44-minute radio show. Now it's we have a little bit more freedom, I suppose.
It'll be as long as it is.
Yeah, we can talk. We can complain about our families. We can discuss problems we're having with our aging parents. It's whatever you want to do. This is your forum, so feel free to share. Brian Schrader. Hey, before we jump
in, session.
It's more like a therapy session. We just happen to be live streaming it and putting it in the podcast. Hey, before we move into the story of the week, Brian and I will be going to Minneapolis next week, and I think as long as there's some decent Wi-Fi, we may want to live stream a little bit from the Twins game. We go to the Twins game next either Friday or Saturday. We've got to figure it out. So I know we have some diehard fans up there in the Twin Cities. So maybe, I guess, depending on when we get out there, we could grab a beverage with some folks and talk sports or talk life. We can complain again about our jobs or our families, which, again, this is a therapy session. So why not take the therapy session on the road? So there, that's it. Are you excited?
Go catch a baseball game.
Yeah. Are you excited about RSA, by the way? We're going to RSA, the Rhetoric Society of America. Brian and I are presenting a paper with John Reef, Brian's lifetime friend, my recent friend. But should be fun. It's a good paper.
Yeah. No, it's going to be good.
Are you writing your paper?
Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't posted it yet. Oh, it's forthcoming.
Can't wait to read it. Okay. Let's jump in to our story of the week. I think people can probably guess what that story of the week is, considering other than the Rockets getting beat, other than the Rockets beating the Warriors in Game 5, this seems to be the biggest story of the moment. Who knows what's going to happen by the time this podcast airs? It might be tied 3-3, and then what I just said won't make any sense. But so this week, NFL owners met, and basically, right, if you look at this wonderful statement from the turd that is Commissioner Roger Goodell, let's see. Okay, I'm just going to read through the 6 points here. All team and league personnel on the field shall stand and show respect for the flag and the anthem. The game operations manual will be revised to remove the requirement that all players be on the field for the anthem. Personnel who choose not to stand for the anthem may stay in the locker room or in a similar location off the field until after the anthem has been performed. A club will be fined by the league if its personnel are on the field and do not stand and show respect for the flag and the anthem. Each club may develop its own work rules consistent with the above principles regarding its personnel who do not stand and show respect for the flag and the anthem. The commissioner will impose appropriate discipline on the league personnel who do not show and stand and show respect for the flag and the anthem, which basically, in summary, means that this week the NFL owners met. They passed these bylaws in which they said that all players, coaches, if they are on the field, they're going to have to stand for the anthem. You cannot kneel in protest during the anthem. You can choose to stay in the locker room and not attend to the anthem. But again, if you're on the field, players, coaches are expected to stand for the anthem, according to this new set of rules passed by NFL owners and the NFL in general. Brian,
can I ask you a question? So it says all team and league personnel on the field shall stand and show respect for the flag. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's a catch-all to sort of make sure that players don't just modify the protest? This was my first reaction is, oh, you banned kneeling. I mean, the kneeling isn't central to the protest. Like it's a particular action that one could take that's looks different than standing at attention with your hand on your heart or whatever. But like, can they just turn their back on the flag? Oh, sorry. Hey, we're recording a podcast.
The dog is obviously intrigued.
You may have to edit. Anyways, if you're on Facebook, there's Dante. Dude!
The dog is very interested in your comment there. So you're saying
I'm just curious. I'm curious if that's what that is. It's a catch-all for that. Like you could do something. Like, listen, what if you stood there and wore a black glove? Holy crap! And put your hand in the air, right? A la Tommy Smith and John Carlos in the 1968 Olympics. Like my point is, there's other ways to sort of be transgressive, to be transgressive against the norms of the way that you're supposed to, quote unquote, show respect for the flag during the national anthem. Are players? Do you see that as a catch-all to prevent that from happening too? It may not matter. It may not be that big of a deal. I'm just curious.
I don't know. When you're kind of reading the minutia of this,
that phrase is curious to me. It's not central to the conversation, right? That doesn't matter. I'm just curious.
Okay, so which phrase are you talking about?
All team and league personnel on the field shall stand, and then the next part is and show respect for the flag.
Yeah.
Well, the assumption there, like this is a big problem because first of all, that makes a pretty normative claim about whether or not kneeling or not standing is disrespectful to the flag in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's there's a direct connection there. That kneeling.
Everyone and their brother has made this argument already that the thing that they're protesting is not the flag. The thing that they're protesting is not the military. The thing that they're protesting is not the United States. They said this, right? Kaepernick said this from the very beginning. The thing being protested is, police brutality and racism, right? And the object or form of the protest is designed to gain attention, but it's not the thing being protested. I saw a silly meme on Facebook. Not even silly. It actually makes a lot of sense. It was like, hey, Rosa Parks was not protesting the bus.
So, okay.
Right?
I think if we're gonna go deep into this, then we have to define.
I may have misstated that meme, but you understand. Like,
I understand what you're saying. So I'm trying to understand why people who are against kneeling are against kneeling. What do you think?
Rosa Parks was not protesting the bus. Gandhi was not protesting the food. Players are not protesting the anthem. It's injustice, stupid. Like, it's it's pretty.
Okay.
It's simple.
Can you put that in words that maybe I'm imagining us as educators right now. Can you put that in words that would not be offensive to people who do not agree with our perspective? Would you want to do that?
Sure.
You're the debater. Persuade.
Sure. The policy that the NFL passes the other day could just say everyone has to stand for the national anthem, right? We'll probably get to this, but the NBA has one. Other sports have one that says that you have to stand. But this is in reaction to a protest whereby NFL players were kneeling during the national anthem. So the insinuation with this extra part of the policy that says and show respect for the flag, at least based on my interpretation, is that that's being coded as something that's not respectful. It's disrespectful to the flag and to the anthem, right? And my point is that's not the point of the protest. That misunderstands the protest. The reason to do it is because it's transgressive and draws attention, right? It draws attention to your cause. Doing something that you're not supposed to do, that is civilly disobedient, that violates a law or violates a norm, right, doesn't have to be specifically in protest to that one thing. It's making a statement about a broader social or political issue. In this case, police brutality. Steve Kerr yesterday got interviewed.
Can I dumb that down real quick?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, before then you can jump right in. So what you're saying is that the NFL athlete is using the platform in order to make issues known, as opposed to protesting the anthem or the flag. It's basically leveraging that moment to draw attention to a complex issue, to a social justice issue. That's what you're saying, right? It's not some sort of, they're not seeing it as an unpatriotic act, right? That's not the intent of those who kneel. Okay, go ahead.
No, yeah, what you said is it. Yeah, okay. Absolutely, it's that. Okay. Listen, lots of people have made this point before, and that's been part of the conversation, is whether or not there's sort of an ancillary disrespect or something to doing it during the national anthem. My point here is different than that, and that is that this is the NFL weighing in on that question and making a pretty, like, this. The passage of this policy is not simply a regulation that the NFL players have to follow, but reads to me more like an argument, right? As a academic who studies argumentation, it's making a normative claim because it's in response to a particular mode of protest, and it's a referendum on that, right? You can't do that thing because it's disrespectful, which seems like an interesting stance for the NFL to take, considering there's disagreement about whether or not it is disrespectful. And you've alluded to this, right? Some people find it offensive and find it disrespectful. I don't. I think what they're doing is bringing attention to a separate issue. But the NFL is basically saying, okay, we're going to act as the Supreme Court on this issue, and here's our sort of terminal ruling on it, right? It makes me angry. So at this level, right, at this particular area of the larger conversation, it upsets me because the owners are not considering the intentionality of the players themselves. There's no regard or understanding for what they are actually attempting to do. It's as if there's no conversation that was ever had. Or I think we talked a few weeks ago about that meeting in New York that happened last year with the owners and some player representatives. The owners simply just did not listen to players, even the players who are not kneeling. I can't quite understand why they're ignoring
their actual intent and what they're trying to do. Like, to me, why do you think that is? Is their argument that weak? Is it that their perspective is just not valued? Why are owners, but also those who are saying, oh, make sure you stand and, give respect to the flag, why are people not paying attention to what players are actually trying to do?
I'm not sure this will be a popular view on this, but my read is that this is probably more of a business decision than anyone else. Did you hear the stuff that there was like leaked audio from these meetings yesterday, and there was Robert Kraft and some other owner, and I can't remember where I saw this, so I'm not going to be able to cite my source or whatever. But this is basically some of my recollection, that they were saying something like, our hand has kind of been forced by the way that Trump has politicized this thing, and it's kind of, we see it as a threat to our product.
Yeah.
So this is kind of the response that we have to placate our fan base. And again, alluding back to that Steve Kerr interview, I should have pulled this up so we could play it. If you maybe we can post it on here a little bit later. It's a really interesting discussion where he says that's exactly what's happening here, is that the NFL is responding to what it sees as kind of a necessary response to its base, to its fan base. That's sort of what it has to do. He makes this secondary argument that's kind of interesting, which is that there's kind of an irony in banning this type of protest because it's all about, sort of free speech and the right to protest and stuff like that, which is what the flag represents. Whereas forcing people to either stand or leave for the flag is kind of anti what the United States stands for. So there's kind of an ironic twist there. Steve Kerr puts it better than I do, but kind of circling back to that first one, that this was maybe less of what I was suggesting before, a referendum on whether or not the protest is valid or whether or not it's disrespectful to the flag, but more a political move to sort of rehabilitate their image in the estimation or in the view of some fans that they think that they've lost or that they are losing. The weird part is, I think that it puts them in a worse position, or at least a less tenable position, because not only are you going to alienate fans on the other side potentially, maybe they're less concerned about those fans, I don't know. But this is the first time where I've kind of considered whether or not how much football I'm going to watch this year, and I'm a big fan, not of the NFL, but I like watching my football team in particular. So I know you're kind of out already, but.
I
think it risks an oversteer or an overcompensation the other direction, where you might alienate fans on the other side, which is a problem. I think too that it's been suggested already, and this story is pretty fresh at this point, that you might see a reaction from the NFLPA, from the Players Association. You might see some discussion about it's a union, about maybe, I don't know, a work stoppage potentially, or some other actions being taken on behalf of the union to say this is the CBA. I'm not a lawyer. Logan's on here, maybe he can chime in. It seems like some of these rule changes you have to get the approval of the Players Association. I don't know if this is immune from kind of the collectively bargained contract the players currently have, or if this is something that the NFL ownership is unilaterally allowed to change. Whether it is or not, the legalese kind of aside, I think that there's a real risk that you've got a good number of players who are already pretty upset, right? We saw this last year when the protests were pretty small, and then Donald Trump and other folks came out and said bad things about those players. And then you saw more players get on board with the protests, not less, right? More players, where the protests kind of became even less about police brutality and more about kind of unity amongst those players and not being kind of painted with too broad of a brush. You might see that again on a larger scale, right? You might see a bigger reaction of players who maybe before weren't interested in participating in this protest, who are now going to say, hey, listen, I chose not to protest before, but now that you're saying I'm not even allowed to, or that I have to go in the locker room if I don't want to stand for the national anthem, now you've given me another issue to be upset about and to rally around potentially.
Yeah, I don't see how players, any member of the NFLPA would be okay with this, even if they agree with standing, even if they agree that they should stand for the anthem. Just the idea that this is being forced upon them by leadership has to be a major, major issue. As a member of a union, I'm really anxious to see kind of what happens. I want to return real quickly to what you had said about Trump, because he obviously came out and Pence came out after this ruling or after these rules were kind of deployed and said that, we're so proud. What did Pence say? Hashtag winning or something like that, which is nice work, Pence. You look like that weird dude from the Burbs, but you know what I'm talking about? He was the guy that was in Blues Brothers. No. He was like one of the Nazis in Blues Brothers, which maybe it was Mike Pence, actually, now that I think about it. So, like, does Trump, I guess I'm going to make a statement and then you can come off, you can respond to it. Are the NFL owners that obtuse to think that Donald Trump still holds sway over the kind of fans that they need in order to make their dollar? Because I simply do not see that. There are a lot of marginalized fans who watch the NFL. There are a lot of not marginalized fans, educated fans, privileged fans who watch the NFL, who are really going to be turned off by this. There are a lot of veterans who watch the NFL who are going to be turned off by this. There are people, right? I think people who think and understand what is going on with social issues in our country that are going to see this and be automatically turned off. And to think that Donald Trump still holds sway over those people, and that's why that decision was made, it's just probably true, but to me it's super, super confusing, and I just simply am flabbergasted by that because it's just so stupid. The guy is a moron. And I don't mind saying that now. We're not on radio anymore. But this response that Trump made is just like, I guess I expected that from him. But who gives him credibility? Who cares what he thinks of this? Who cares whether he believes that players should stand for the anthem and that you should be kicked out of the country because you're unpatriotic? I just don't get it. And I don't understand how NFL owners can be so fucking dumb to think that we have to basically adhere to the line laid out by Donald Trump. I just don't get it. I just don't get it. I thought they were supposed to be smart people, but I seriously don't see that now.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, and that's why I think that it's potentially more of a well, see. Now you don't. Now you've kind of pretzeled my line of thinking.
And by the way, I want to say this, right? I want to say that this is, when people make this a political issue, that is to me wrong-headed. This is a social issue that was being brought up by NFL players to shed light on certain acts and of persecution that were happening to those they identify with, or those they're in solidarity with. To say remove politics from the NFL football game is ignorant, because, as you and I have pointed out, politics have been
Jesus Christ, I'm sorry.
Politics were made a part of NFL football after 9/11 in particular. Politics are there when we're asked to stand for the national anthem. Politics are there when we have presidents who attend the Super Bowl. Politics are there, and they've been there. And it's just that somebody's kind of politics don't jive with the politics, or what we assume to be the politics, of these players who are kneeling. One more thing before you kind of take off here, because I know we have listeners who are cops, and they are good cops. But that does not mean that some cops are not good cops, because in every profession, there are people who are good. There are people who are bad. And I don't mean like evil. I mean good at your job, bad at your job, smart, dumb, all of these things. I just don't understand why we have to take this as a slight to all police officers, because it's simply not. This thing is so fucking complex, and it's so hard to fully understand and even articulate. But I guess that's my. You go ahead. I'm going to recollect my thoughts here.
No, you're not wrong, right? And I think that is a common response from people that a protest that decries police brutality or racism particularly against kind of law enforcement types. Like there's a fear that what that protest represents is the claim, the implicit claim that all police officers are bad police officers, or that all police officers are racist. And I fundamentally, deep down, do not believe that's the claim that's being made, right? In fact, if you listen to the way that people talk about these protests, usually what they talk about is sort of, people needing implicit bias training, that it's, oftentimes not overt racism, that it's a systematic racism that isn't necessarily manifest in discrete incidents of policing, but rather something that exists that's kind of interwoven in the fabric of policing, which kind of means that it's not a referendum about individual cops at all, but rather the system in which policing takes place. All of that being said, there certainly are, right? And I think our listeners who are police officers would agree with this, with what you just said, that there are incidences of racism on the police force and in policing, right? I mean, we don't even have to go back very far to dredge up examples of things that are really troubling to watch. Who's the guy, the Milwaukee Bucks basketball player who got tased? Did you watch that video? It's disturbing, man. The guy, parked in a handicap spot, and he gets tackled by 5 police officers who are trying to make a federal case out of what is a parking ticket, right? And there's no question that what happened there is wrong. The police force in Milwaukee has already admitted it, right? And that's the type of stuff that NFL protests are targeting, right? It's unfair treatment of individuals and what seems like much higher incidences of those examples of unfair treatment when we're talking about people of color, right? But it's not a black mark on law enforcement across the board. It's kind of microaggression stuff. It's implicit bias stuff. It's systematic racism stuff. And yeah, occasionally it's bad eggs, right? But none of those things mean that all cops are bad, right? That's not. I'm not trying to wave my political flag here just because I think everyone who listens to this knows that I'm a little bit left of center, right? But I honestly, and being genuine here, I don't believe that's what the protest is about. And that's hopefully not the reaction that people have. All of that being said, if that's what you think the protest is about, I guess I understand, why you would be upset about it. But I would encourage people who think that to sort of take some time to listen to interviews from people who are on the front lines of this stuff and see what they have to say about it. Because it's genuinely not what they're saying, right? Case in point is, go to the horse's mouth. Go listen to what Kaepernick said. He got interviewed about this stuff during the preseason 2 NFL seasons ago and says what he's protesting. Right? Let's
take a quick, let's give a shout out to our sponsors, and then we'll return to this. I kind of thought that this was going to take our entire time anyhow, but there's just too much to be said. We'll be right back. So are these folks, are these players who are, why don't we listen to them? We still have not answered this question. Why? I mean, this is like the idea. This is something that you and I have probably studied in one of our intercultural communication courses, or critical cultural studies, which is the idea that being able to speak for oneself is a privilege, being able to be heard is a privilege, all that stuff, yada yada yada. I don't want to get too academic here, but why are we not listening to the perspective of these players? Like even the NFLPA's response, which you can find on Twitter, it didn't get nearly the circulation across the media outlets that the owner's decision did. I just don't understand why are we not paying attention to what they mean by this and what this thing is supposed to do? Because again, holy shit, it's not unpatriotic. I just don't get it. They're not trying to be anti-American. We live in a place where you can stand or sit or kneel in protest. And that's what makes this place great. It's not like you and I we're not criticizing America. We're not criticizing our nation. But there are certain social, political, economic structures that have worked in the benefit of others when they have not worked in the benefit of others, of some.
Yeah. I think
this is drawing attention to a lot of problems, and I don't understand why it's so hard to fucking acknowledge that.
Here's a way that you can tease this out too, which is to say, don't imagine yourself as kind of giving a thumbs up or a thumbs down to whether or not you think people should protest during the national anthem, but rather, do you think that professional athletes in general should be allowed to express themselves on political or social or cultural issues sort of while at work, right? Does that make sense? Because what this is basically saying is that we don't want to have any of that stuff happening on the playing field. And so to kind of continue this thought experiment, then I think what you need to do is say, what are other forms of political or cultural or social expression that happen while people are at work that might also be restricted or regulated based on the premise, the foundational philosophy or ideology of this regulation that's passed by the NFL, right? Is it okay to kneel in prayer in a celebratory way? Is that the same thing? Does that fall in the same category? Do you follow my logic here? Mm-hmm. Right? The idea of free speech and free expression, and I'm not talking about this in a legal sense, right? I'm not a legal scholar, but the free speech as a philosophy, as opposed to free speech as a law. But free speech as a philosophy is one that says we should have the right to express ourselves, right? And that is something that's valuable to democracy, right? That's valuable to the exchange of ideas, and it's valuable for us to sort of achieve self-fulfillment, right? One manifestation of that, one example of free speech and free expression might be protest, but there are other ones too that are non-protesty. And my point is that this sort of opens the door to other types of regulations on free speech. Not to say that there are no legitimate regulations on free speech, but this opens up the door to other regulations on free speech for athletes, or imagine it in your workplace that you might find problematic, right? Do you think, for example, it would be okay if at your workplace, wherever you worked, that there was a regulation passed by your employer that said, listen, no political conversations, right? We don't want to hear that stuff. If you're at the water cooler or you're sitting at the lunch table, please don't talk about Donald Trump, and don't talk about politics, and don't talk about the Supreme Court, and don't talk about social justice issues. We just don't want to hear that, right? Don't be sharing memes or liking memes on your phone on Facebook, not when you're at work, right? You can do that on your own time. If we kind of take this to its logical conclusion, what you have is these really sort of demarcated times and spaces where you're allowed to express yourself in particular ways that I think taken to the end, to its end point, to an extreme endpoint, become, pretty untenable positions. It becomes a really kind of ridiculous caricature of what society should kind of look like, right? So I don't know. I kind of see this as a step in kind of an interesting and scary direction. And I wonder if people in the back of their minds, and I've already alluded to this, are saying things like, well, these regulations already exist in some fashion, right? The NBA has had a rule, I guess, for a long time that you have to, stand and be respectful, or at least stand during the national anthem. This was during the Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf stuff. I don't know if it was there before that, but you remember he kind of got in trouble and then blackballed for not standing during the national anthem. You remember that from the 90s?
No, I do.
But,
yeah.
But I'll say that this one seems to me to be a little bit different because it's in response to something that's kind of currently happening in the NFL. It's a response to protests that we saw all last year.
Okay, I've got a question, and I guess I was wanting to have this conversation kind of all week with you, as somebody who I deem smart. Why? What needs to be introduced into our society to counter, first off, the immediate reaction to not just kneeling and protests, but also to things like the Me Too movement, to any of these kind of social phenomenon that just get us all wound up so fast, Trumpism, whatever you want to call it. What is needed? What do we need to introduce to just slow down our thought process, to slow down the reaction, and to make it a little bit more difficult than to just surround ourselves with people who are saying and thinking the same things that we are? Because to me, like, this is a moment of reflection. This week could have been a moment in which, had we all been in our classrooms, we could have talked about it. We could have had conversations about it. We could have had conversations at the dinner table that would have opened up perhaps the thinking that you and I are trying to get to today. But instead, we can just go on Twitter, we can follow Sage Rosenfels, or we can follow Donald Trump, and we can hear and consume the perspective that we want. You as an academic, you as a scholar, you as somebody that I value as a smart person. How do we counter this? What needs to happen? Because you had just put it out. This is interesting, but it's also scary. What needs to happen? I just don't get it. I just don't get it. Do you see the same kind of stuff going on, like in your classroom and the people that you talk to? Do you know what I'm saying?
I'll be honest. I think that people are sort of, and this is based obviously only on my personal experiences with people talking about this issue, seem sort of over it and jaded by it, which raises an interesting question about this as a strategy for if it's true that the NFL is just trying to end this controversy and put it to bed by saying, here's a ruling one way or another, you can do it or you can't do it. You know, if we have this rule that says that players can't kneel for the national anthem, it sort of eliminates it as a talking point for politicians potentially. I'm not even sure if that's totally true, but it probably neutralizes it at least part of the way. My fear is that it might breed a bigger reaction than they anticipated. I don't know what they thought the reaction would be. It seems to me that maybe a better response would be to sort of let something like this simmer out from the perspective of NFL ownership. So it kind of remains to be seen whether or not I'm right that people are kind of over this thing and don't care, and this will sort of just be water under the bridge, or if this will kind of reignite the controversy and kind of give people a new perspective to kind of sink their teeth into. I don't know. That's kind of my read as to people's reaction. And
I guess I'm asking on a larger scale.
On nothing.
I'm asking on a larger scale though. Like what do we need? How can we just? Are we in a moment that's different from the past, in the sense that in the past were we more open to conversations with people we didn't agree with? Were we less reactionary? Is this a product of social media, of 24-hour news, of Trump? I'm trying to understand this moment, because it is really starting, like, it's kind of getting to me. It's getting to me. It's just frustrating, man. It's frustrating to go into the classroom and try to have a conversation about really complex issues or really difficult issues, and people will just shut down because somebody's perspective is too conservative or somebody's perspective is too liberal. Yeah. And when you challenge somebody's perspective, they're offended by it. And that's on the right and the left, by the way, listeners. Like, they talk about the liberal snowflakes. It's not as if conservatives aren't snowflakes as well. It's not as if they have their not hurt by criticism. I think that's just like, go back to your comment about free speech. That's of course, that amendment, right? Being able to say what you want is fantastic. But I don't think that should protect you from not being hurt, from not being offended. That's not a right. Like, especially if what somebody else is saying is reasonable. This is just it's very frustrating to me. It's just very frustrating to me.
No, I mean, I understand what you're talking about. And yeah, I mean, I think the point that you're making is one that lots of folks have kind of observed, that people are doing a lot more kind of going to their corners, and maybe you're right that whatever social media or the internet and the way that we kind of receive our media creates echo chambers where we don't have to be sort of exposed to viewpoints from the other side. We can kind of choose to not hear them. We can block them, or we can filter them, or whatever. And that might be part of the problem. I mean, you brought up kind of the analogy of the Me Too movement, and I think that one might be more telling for a different reason, which is that's an issue, sexual assault and sort of sexual harassment and sexism generally is an issue that sort of popped up for years and years and years and years and years. But for the first time maybe not the first time, but for the first time in recent history, it seems to have staying power. Right? I mean, we woke up to news this morning that who's the Miramax guy? Harvey Weinstein. Yeah, after facing all of these just absolutely ridiculous allegations, not ridiculous in that they're not true, but like just hard to believe, insane allegations. How many women have and when I say hard to believe, that's not what I mean. Disgusting allegations against Harvey Weinstein based on what those allegations say that he did, and also just the sheer volume of them. It looked like, people had survived that sort of those types of controversies before. Not only is he ousted and his company goes bankrupt and gets sold and all that stuff, now it looks like he's going to face criminal charges, right? So the Me Too movement is an example of kind of people latching onto issues in productive ways and keeping things in the public eye and working towards meaningful change and meaningful resolution, right? It doesn't seem to be going away. It doesn't seem like the conversation is stopping. Instead, it seems like more and more stuff is kind of coming to the surface, and people are being brought into the fold. I don't know if this will turn out to be true, but similar claims were made about conversations about gun control after the shootings in Florida. So maybe there is something to people becoming more staunch in their political positions and less willing to kind of meet in the middle and moderate their views in terms of getting things done. I'm not going to say that's necessarily objectively true all the time, and I think maybe this NFL protest police brutality conversation, like those other things, maybe 10 years ago would have been a flash in the pan conversation. We would have talked about it, and then it would have, been swallowed up by the 24-hour news cycle, and we would have turned our attention to someone else. For as bad of a decision as I think this is on the part of the NFL for a variety of reasons, I don't think it will be a successful business decision for them, which is the most charitable read I can give them is they think it will end the controversy and bring in some fans that they lost. I don't think it will do that. But if there is a positive, I think there's a good chance that it reignites the conversation about the protest and about free speech and hopefully kind of what Kaepernick was trying to do in the first place, reignites the conversation about police violence and police brutality. So I see your point that the conversations are not as as dialogic as we want them to be, as kumbaya, as kind of walking a mile in someone else's shoes and seeing things from their perspective. But I guess maybe there's a little part of me that suggests that if that's what we had in the past, but that never led to meaningful conversation, what happened is that people kind of came together and said, yeah, I see your point, and then nothing ever changed, that maybe this is better, right? It's harder, right? It's harder to have conversations. They're far more uncomfortable.
All right, I'm going to push back against you here.
Pushback.
I think, you're taking a very, very liberal viewpoint on this. And I don't necessarily, I agree with you, but I think that like the Me Too movement, the gun control movement, the anti-NFL movement, right? Obviously, we're on the same side of the aisle when it comes to this. But what happens, I would argue that with all three of those plus others, now, right, once you get people on the left who also camp out on the extreme left, and then they don't want to have a conversation and about with other people on the other side about these issues. Now, to me, what that means is, okay, I get, oh, you're a gun-toting conservative hillbilly, right? All men are evil. Or right, the NFL ownership and NFL powers that be are racists, right? So that might be the three perspectives that the extreme left will take and circulate. To me, that is just as problematic when it comes to actually having a conversation as those that are on the right, because what that means is now I can't have a conversation about the systems that have put in place to make men do the things that they do to hurt women. Or I can't have a conversation put in place, or I can't have a conversation about the system put in place that allows rich white men to be NFL owners and come to that position. Because instead it's just, okay, no, all of them are bad and they're not trying to do anything. Now, obviously, I think I was pretty clear at the beginning of this show. I don't agree with the owners. I don't stand with them. But I just have a lot of problems when we camp out on both sides of this, because there are some systemic issues that could be changed via policy implementation, but also just kind of policy debate that won't happen when neither side is willing to come to the table without being so entrenched in their perspective that they fail to even acknowledge that there might be some validity in the argument of the other side that isn't offensive to them. Does that make sense to you?
No, it does.
I get it, right? The Me Too movement is fantastic, right? It's great. I'm not arguing against it. I'm really glad it happened. But it's also foreclosing a conversation about what kind of culture is set up to allow men to act this way. Because we can't have that conversation. We can't have a conversation about things like porn, right? And what porn has done, or fraternities, or how boys are taught about sex or something like that. Like, obviously we're not even talking about sports now, but we can have the same conversation about the NFL and about sports, about the NFL in particular, right? What kind of system is put in place in which the vast majority of those who participate on the field are African Americans who come from underprivileged homes or have somehow been persecuted at some point in their life. Like, we can't have that conversation because instead you're just a black body who is arguing against a white body, and that's the end of that conversation. We're not contemplative enough. We're not thoughtful enough, and we ought to be. It doesn't take intelligence, or it doesn't take book smarts, to do this. It just takes contemplation and thoughtfulness. And I guess, I want to be able to teach that in the classroom, not at the college level, but at the elementary level, at the middle school level, at the high school level, in schools that aren't just, rich schools, white schools, but inner city schools, diverse schools. Like, things are just, I don't know, man. I'm not seeing a lot of hope, and it's really starting to get me down. And I need to defend myself.
I was going to say, yeah, that's a pretty pessimistic rant on your part. No, I mean, I understand what you're saying. Let me say this though: like, when you hear people say, and I'm not saying this about you, but when you hear people say, "Hey, listen, we need to listen to other people's views and understand where they're coming from," very often what they're talking about is they want other people to see where they're coming from, but they're not super willing to see where someone else is coming from. Right? Does that make sense?
Exactly. Yep.
But I mean, not to pat ourselves on the back, but I mean, we had a conversation about this before we recorded, and hopefully it comes through in our discussion that we're trying our best to sort of understand the perspective of people who are offended by the protests of NFL players. I mean, I'm trying to understand where they're coming from, right? I get why the correlation between the protest happening during the national anthem could be confused for protesting the anthem, but what I'm trying to suggest is, listen to what they're saying, read about it. That's not what the protest is.
Talk to people.
I'm trying to reach out and explain that as much as possible. And I guarantee you there's listeners out there right now who've either turned this off already or are saying, no, you just don't get it. There's another thing that I think that you're just not understanding. And I'm doing my best. I don't know what that is. I'm trying to have the most. I'm trying to be open-minded about it, but I don't know if it's my perspective or my experience or whatever lens that I bring to this conversation means that I can't put myself in the shoes of that person. I'm with you. I don't want to not have conversations. I do want people to have conversations. I mean, truthfully, I think both of our philosophies about this podcast are not like, come here where we're going to tell you the truth, but rather watch us have a conversation and try and figure stuff out and, listen to it. And maybe you think that we're saying smart shit sometimes, or maybe we're saying dumb things, but it's about having a conversation about these issues more than sort of pointing at answers, I guess.
Well, we are going to actually have to drop some truth on people, which would be that you need to go to Lost Highway Brewing Company this weekend. You need to get some.
That's objectively true. There's no
objectively true
room for debate.
If you don't want to be outside on this Memorial Day, you could just go to Pizzà and you could do a game room. You could go to Fermentra. You could go to Grist. You could get your taxes done by our folks over there at Guardian Tax Solutions. I mean, there's a lot of options, right, Brian?
A lot of options.
If you're a hermit, website built. There are options. If you are an outdoorsy person, you are options. But to those who we just mentioned, we want to thank you for supporting the show. Thanks to those who did our voiceovers this week, our ads this week. And Brian, most importantly, thanks to you, buddy. I'll see you in a week. I get to see you in a week. Hey.
It's been a while. It's been a year.
It's been a year. Well, we do see each other it's weird because we talk every week. We see each other.
Yeah.
Officially. We get a hug, buddy. We get a hug. Yeah. All right.
We'll have a long Chariots of Fire embrace.
I love it. All right, old boy. You have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Yep.
All right. See ya. Okay. We are still live. There we go.
Longer than usual.